Welcome to Heidi Relationships. Today, we'll read some more stories from Reddit. But before we start, I would really appreciate if you could subscribe to the channel, like the video if you enjoyed it, and maybe leave a comment down below. That would help the channel a lot. Thank you very much in advance.
The first one is titled, Ex-Wife's Family Poisoned My Son's Mind, 18 male. He thinks I, 33 male, abandoned him. Judging by the age, I'm guessing you all know how young I was when he was born. His mom, my ex, we're best friends since we were in kindergarten. She was the love of my life. We were together from 5th grade up until our sophomore year. Her family just made us stop having contact, they moved and everything. For the longest time I wondered why, but now I know my answer. Beginning of June, I'm sent a TXT from an unknown number. You don't know me but, and after a long message he tells me he's my son. And wanted me to know he graduated from high school, got accepted into college no thanks to me. He just wanted me to know that he managed to do it without his deadbeat father. I have my cell on my Facebook page and stuff, so he probably got it from there. So, part of me was thinking this had to be a prank, but he mentioned my ex. I had to call him and ask to meet up. He at least agreed. I was nervous meeting him, but he seemed to hate me. It was very emotional for me because I saw so much of my ex in him and also some me. And I never had a clue. My ex passed when he was 2. Her parents told him I wanted no involvement in his life. But I was never even told of his existence. I absolutely would have been around if I knew I got her pregnant. He didn't believe me, and he thinks I'm just trying to cover my ass. That's not it, but he seems to think so. They went as far as to tell him I broke up with her when she told me and wanted nothing to do with him, as a way to convince him he doesn't need a dad like me in his life. My son left the park where we met still not believing me. He was really upset. What stung the most was the hate on his face. The way he was looking like I'm the biggest piece of crap on the planet. I'm crushed. I told him I want to know more about him, be in his life, and I absolutely would have if I'd known. He doesn't seem to want anything to do with me. They've said too much against me. How do I get him to see that I'm telling the truth? I'm heartbroken over this, never wanted him to think he was unwanted his whole life. Is there any way to convince him I didn't know anything about him? Or what do I do to navigate things with him? A user in the comments said, this is obviously going to be very hard to negotiate. Your son will need space and time, so take it slowly. If he comes to accept your story, then he will also have to deal with the fact that your ex's parents effectively deprived him of a father for 18 years. Heavy stuff. See if you can get him to agree that you can email or write him. Then set out your story again, trying not to be judgmental of others but just putting it from your point of view. Giving him facts he can check, like that your ex's family moved away when she was pregnant with him, can help to show that your version of events checks out. Also, are your parents still around? Because if so, they have a grandchild they never knew about. Perhaps they can confirm that you are telling the truth. I would think that over time your son is going to want to find out the facts for himself, but you can't just expect him to take your word for it right away. But if you are non-confrontational and you make it about him, not you, chances are the truth will be known in the end. Another user said, he contacted you, he agreed to meet you. Now he has a lot of confusing information that he was not expecting. Give it time. Offer for him to meet with your parents if he wishes to. Don't push anything. If he comes back, then maybe say, what happened in the past is done. I cannot change that I didn't know I had a son, and you cannot change what you have been told. But we can create a new relationship going forward if you want to. Then I am more than willing to support whatever you want this relationship to be. With time he will see that you are not the person that he was told you were, and that you are in fact a decent human being. He can then go back and see if he can get answers from his grandparents, but they may also have been told from her that you left, etc., so they may not even know the truth, though the moving away thing is fishy. The next one is titled, Update. My son's 18M. Mother's family poisoned him against me. He thinks I, 33M, abandoned him. Honestly, I wasn't sure about posting this. It's been a very emotional heavy ordeal and I'm not usually one to post such personal things online. But you all helped a lot and if it hadn't been for your suggestions I'd probably still be lost. Well, more lost than I still am right now. I decided to go ahead and find some way to prove things happened the way they did. Old friends of hers from school, family. At least so he'd know the real truth, not just my word against theirs. It took some time, but I actually managed to find and get in touch with my ex's older sister. She wasn't as open to meeting me. Practically had to beg her to at least give me a half hour. Not only was my son told that I bailed on him, but she was told too. Not by my ex though. Their parents. I explained my side of it. It didn't seem like she believed me. Thing is, she was across the country in college already, so was only told what happened. I thought I had hit a dead end with her. Only she calls me days later crying. This is where it gets personal. My ex passed away because she was depressed and well, she did something. She left letters for everyone. Her, their parents, my son, and apparently me. Only they never gave it to me obviously. She kept it, but again she thought I was a deadbeat and felt I didn't deserve my ex's last words. She apologized for that. Our meeting sparked interest and she decided after all that time to read what my ex wrote to me. She felt weird about reading it before because my ex intended it to be only for me, so to her it seemed like it might be disrespectful. But she went ahead and read it. All of it was there. Her apologies for never telling me the truth, letting her parents make this decision to keep me from him. Many other personal things that I'd rather not get into here. Her sister came over with the letter. I finally got to read it and hit me so hard instantly. Think it's the first time since this came out that I really acknowledge the fact that I lost her. Her sister agreed to talk to my son alone. It's all out there now. He called me that same week to ask if we can talk. And he was here at my place. I could tell this was hard on him, just how he still looked angry at me, but he was pretty emotional too. I just told him how sorry I was for not being there. He deserved a father, and I couldn't be that when he needed it. And like I told him before, I'm open to being whatever he'd like me to be in his life. After a while we wound up on the topic of his mom. That I was able to freely talk about for hours. He was very curious about that. Took out old pictures and everything. First conversation we got to have without any hostility or tensions. I did break down a few times talking about her, but he seemed to understand. He came over around 9 and it was past midnight by the time we looked at the clock. My son hasn't said anything about what he'd like from our relationship, but he says we can keep talking. I know it's going to take a lot of time and he's not in the best place right now mentally or emotionally. From what her sister told me, he really went off on her parents. Well, they both did. Right now, he's staying with a friend and she's helping him look for his own place. He's got so much going on, so following everyone's advice here, giving him all the time, space he needs. I'm ready to be there for him whenever he needs me. And he at least seems open to it. We have only talked a few more times since. Still a bit short with me. Not as angry as he was before at least. He knows the truth now, and that's the most important step. It's a bit conflicting because I'm happy that he believes me and giving us the opportunity to talk, but also sad that his whole world is a mess right now and he's trying to deal with it. Sorry for the long post. I know it's quite a bit, but it's so much that's happened in such a short period. It's not perfect. Don't think it'll ever be. He knows now he was lied to and we're talking little by little. All I really hoped for. Thank you Reddit for this support. I'll definitely be following your advice as some of you gave some really good ones. The next one is titled, Mike 25M. Family cut contact with me 5 years ago after a fight with my younger brother. Now, they want me to come back, but I'm having doubts about it. My family pretty much cut all ties with me at the end of 2015. Things had been a bit turbulent for a while, but when I went over to my parents' house for Christmas in 2015, I got very drunk one night and got into an argument with my younger brother, which ended up turning physical. I was 19 at the time, he would have been 15, and he came out of it pretty badly. Without going into massive detail, he had said something which struck a nerve. I won't say what because it's quite personal, and not really relevant here, and I ended up injuring him quite badly. There was a question of potentially involving the police, but nothing ever happened in regard to that. In the end they all just told me they wanted nothing to do with me anymore. Which is fair enough. I was completely in the wrong and they were absolutely right to want to cut me off. I'm not complaining about that in the slightest. I had already moved out by that stage, so it wasn't a case of kicking me out, it was more just telling me to never come back. Again, I can't blame them for this at all, and would be surprised if you could either. This post isn't about me complaining about being cut off or pretending that I didn't deserve it, because I did, and I'm not trying to play the victim here. I genuinely regret what I did and have spent time trying to self-improve in the wake of it. It was quite difficult for me to come to terms with this for the first year or so afterwards. The only person in my family I had any contact with was my mom. We never really spoke in depth, just small updates, wishing each other happy birthday and things like that. Honestly though, after that first year, things have gotten so much better for me. I stopped drinking, which was the root of a lot of my problems. I got my head down and ended up doing very well at uni. I've now got a job that I love, and I've been with my girlfriend for the best part of 4 years, and things are absolutely great. To be brutally honest, I don't miss my family. My relationship with them hadn't been great for a while before the fight, and as far as I was concerned I didn't miss them, and they didn't miss me, and being on a non-contact basis with all of them apart from occasional contact with my mum was for the better. However, over the last few months, my mum began messaging me much more frequently, and asking more personal questions about my life, my work, my relationship, etc. I thought it was just boredom on her part, but she maintained it for a while, and began to introduce the idea of me coming back to visit her at some point, which I always shrugged. She started to persist with it, and then yesterday it all came to a head when she added me to a WhatsApp group chat with the rest of the family. I was then told how they had all come to a family decision that 5 years was enough, that my brother had found it in his heart to forgive me for what happened, and that they wanted me to come over at some point to catch up on lost time. These are all quotes from what they sent me. I didn't say much, I just said I wanted time to think. I'm quite torn on this now. Part of me feels like I am obliged to go along with it. They cut contact with me because of my own actions, and if my brother's forgiven me and wants to re-establish contact with me, then it's my duty to do so. On the other hand, I feel like since contact was cut, my life improved a lot. My relationship with them had been on a downward slope for a fair bit of time beforehand, and I just haven't found myself missing any of it. That's why I'm asking for advice. Would you say that I'm obliged to go and re-establish contact because it was my fault that contact was cut, or do you think it would be acceptable for me not to do so? A user in the comments said, "Personally, I feel like it would be worth at least a few meetups to see how things go. You're a different person now than you were then, and they're likely different people now, too. You know you don't need them in your life, but you may find that being around them enhances your life in some way. Or you may find that being around them brings only negative feelings. Just because you give it a try doesn't mean you have to keep them in your life if you don't want to. Emo, if you don't, you'll always have a nagging, what if feeling." Another user said, "Before the fight, in what ways was your relationship with your family rocky? Not that you have to go into detail or anything, of course. I ask because it sounds like some of their actions, behaviors leading up to the fight weren't of the best nature either. Have they accepted responsibility for their roles in what happened and apologized? Or from their perspective, is this all 100% on you and you're the villain that they are graciously providing another chance to? Also, kudos for pulling yourself out of a bad situation. I know that that's extremely difficult to do." The next one is titled, "Update. My 25M family cut contact with me 5 years ago after a fight with my younger brother. Now, they want me to come back, but I'm having doubts about it." I wasn't initially planning on doing an update for that post, but the number of responses I got from it were absolutely unprecedented, so I decided it was right of me to do one. I didn't respond to every single comment, but I did read all of them. I greatly appreciate everyone's input, whether it was positive or negative, or telling me to go back or cut contact completely. It was really good to get different takes on the situation because at the time it was a lot to take in, and still is in a way. I'll start off by saying that soon after that post was written I phoned my brother. We talked for a few minutes about how things were going, and then I apologized to him for what happened back in 2015. He didn't specifically say he forgave me, but he was amicable and said that he appreciated me doing it. I'm glad I did it. I know 5.5 years is a long time to have gone without doing it, but that was the first vocal conversation I'd had with him since the family cut contact. He told me that the whole incident hadn't left him with any lasting mental or physical damage, and while I have no way of knowing whether that's completely true, I was glad to hear it. I don't want to make it about myself, but it did also feel like a bit of a weight lifted off my shoulders. In terms of the actual resumption of contact, it won't be happening for now. After a few days of talking to the family as a collective in the group chat, which I have now left, as well as some individual conversations with different members, I told them that I was happy to increase contact with them through messaging, but that as things stand I didn't think resuming face-to-face contact would be right, and that I wasn't going to do it. As I stated in the initial post, I was already having severe doubts about it, and the conversations I had with them pretty much made my mind up for me. I'll list a few examples of it here. Much of the discussion I had with family was done through a group chat in which I, 25M, was added to by my mum, 45F. This group chat also contained my dad, 54M, and my two brothers, 20M and 14M. The group chat was titled, Reunion, so it was pretty obvious what their intentions were. The initial language used by them when I was added bothered me. I gave some examples of it in the original post. Things like my mum saying my brother had found it in his heart to forgive me, and them coming to a family decision that 5 years was enough. It made it seem like there was no chance of it being a normal family relationship at all, and that I would always be indebted and subservient to them in some form for that. As I said, I had no issue with being cut off and felt they were pretty justified in doing so, but that doesn't mean I would be prepared to come back and be in a constant state of owing one, and likely being made to feel pressured to do things for them because they were oh so kind to find it in their hearts to let me back. This sort of language continued throughout me being in that group chat. Some more examples were being told that I had lots of work to do. If we wanted a normal relationship, notice that they didn't say we, and also was also compared to the prodigal son multiple times by my, very religious, parents, who just made me think they were doing it for their own spiritual reasons rather than actually being interested in having me back as part of the family. The final nail in the coffin was that when I specifically expressed doubts about it, my dad said, "After all you did to us as a family, we've decided to let you back in," and then pretty much went on to tell me that I should be biting their hands off for the chance to make amends, and that I was ungrateful for not doing so. I told them I was backing out of it pretty soon after that. A few of the replies to my original post asked if any of them needed an organ. I initially brushed this off as a joke, but after some of the conversations I had I genuinely think it's possible that that's true. My girlfriend, 24F, is also a big reason why I was initially having doubts, and a couple of things that were said by my dad completely reinforced these. I 100% know that he would dislike her, not through any fault of her own, but mainly because he has some very old-fashioned views on women, and he's also quite racist. She is only half white, and when I was younger my dad made it pretty clear that he didn't want me to date outside of my race. In the group chat, he described her as my exotic girlfriend, and made a couple of very stereotypical assumptions on her based on her race, which made it pretty clear to me that he still found it wrong and abnormal of me to be with a girl who isn't completely white. If I resumed a somewhat normal father-son relationship with him, I'm almost certain that he'd try to interfere in some way and would at the very least encourage me to end things with her. It's not like I've only been seeing her for a month either. We've been together for almost 4 years or have discussed marriage, so she absolutely takes priority over the family. Those are the main reasons behind me choosing not to go down the route of face-to-face contact with the family. There are a few other things too. such as the fact that they seemed awfully interested in grandchildren who didn't even exist, and also that I suspected that it was all my mom's doing and that the rest of the family weren't that interested. I'm fairly sure she was feeding the other lines. My 14-year-old brother was typing an awful lot like my 45-year-old mom. Let's put it that way. With all these factors combined with my initial doubts about it made my mind up that I wasn't going to resume face-to-face contact. I messaged them telling them that while I did appreciate them trying to get me to do so, I just had too many doubts about it to go and start meeting with them face-to-face or going to their house. I did say that they all had my number now and were free to text me at any point if they wanted to talk, and then left the group chat. I know they've all read it, because they've all been online since I sent it, but I haven't had a single message from any of them. To be honest, I'm not entirely sure if I ever will. And yet, I can't really say I feel that sad about it. I'm glad I've apologized to my brother, and if that's the end of all contact with them then so be it. It is what it is. My mom was contacting me every day in the months leading up to her deciding I should start seeing the family again. Now it's beginning to seem to me that she was doing so because she wanted me to return to them on my hands and knees, groveling and begging for forgiveness. Things certainly began to turn a bit sour when it became clear that I wasn't going to do that. Perhaps she sees it as the final betrayal and wants nothing more to do with me now. At the end of the day, I'm never going to pretend that they were for a second wrong for cutting contact with me. They did it to protect their 15-year-old son, and I completely understand it. Ultimately though, I grew up, ended my addiction and built a life for myself off the back of it without them involved in my life. It's very likely that they still had this image of the 19-year-old who turned completely white when he was told they wanted nothing more to do with him, but that really isn't me anymore. When they initially kicked me out, I felt like I needed them even though we didn't have the greatest relationship. 5 years on from that, I certainly don't think I do anymore. I apologize to anyone who read the initial post and wanted me to go and see them in person again, but this is just how things have turned out. Once again, thank you to everyone for offering support and advice, and I hope that anyone reading this who has their own issues with family and estrangement is able to navigate them, and build a relationship back if they so wish. This is the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed the relationship stories. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video and write a comment. I really appreciate your support and it helps my channel so much. Thank you.